This feels strange to be the one being interviewed.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you in a hot seat.
I'm normally the one with the question, so prepare yourself because I might turn it back on you.
Oh, please do.
Or it'll turn into free therapy for me.
Welcome to the Lighthouse Conversations, a podcast featuring entrepreneurs and tastemakers from the world of arts, culture, tech, and of course, food. I'm your host, Hasham Montasser. Before I start, I just want to say that this is our 30th episode and that the Lighthouse actually turned 4 on the 17th of January. We're extremely proud about that. And we just want to thank everyone, our guests, followers, and of course, our listeners for all your support, all the help throughout those last 4 years, especially after reopening, after COVID. And we promise you a lot more to come in 2021 and some very, very exciting guests. Now let's get on with our episode. Now you might have felt that today's guest voice is familiar, and that's because if you live in Dubai, you've probably heard her voice on Dubai Eye 103.8. Helen Farmer has been in the Middle East for 14 years, starting out in Bahrain, but quickly moving to Dubai. She's a BBC-trained broadcast journalist, starting out in print before moving over to radio. She's well known as the host of Afternoons with Helen Farmer, her daily radio show, where, as the tagline goes, she gets you the very highs and lows of life in the UAE. As a side note, let's hope there's more highs than lows in 2021, but I'm digressing. Helen is the founder of Mothership DXB, her own blog cum Instagram site, where she shares tips and tricks on motherhood and what it's like to be out and about in the UAE. I feel like I'm going to start with a story that, I've known you for a while, but we sort of reconnected recently. I now call myself the originator. I just want you to know
are the originator of a brilliant beachside invention that more people need to know about.
I know. I love that story. So when we kind of re-met at the beach with our kids, and I had that little yellow hose, which, by the way, I sold the idea from a friend of mine.
The real originator.
There's a real originator, which is Ghalia. I am the fake originator. But then you're the one who made it famous.
I took it public.
You took it public. Which is great. It's a great device, by the way.
It's just it's a power hose that some people might think would be abusive for using on your children to get the sand off, but I think it's genius.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
And gets all these little sand pieces out of the kids in an hour.
You've got to bear in mind, I love my husband dearly, but he's got American Psycho standards when it comes to cleanliness in our car. I'm not allowed to eat or drink anything apart from water in our car.
So this thing may have helped your marriage.
It's definitely improved relations. So thank you.
That's great. That's great. Well, we'll jump right in. Let's start a little bit of. We were just reminiscing about this. You came to Dubai. Was it 2005?
2007.
Okay, 2007.
2007. I was in Bahrain for a little time before here. And like many people in the region, moved here for a really bad ex, who I'm no longer with. But I was 24. I look back and think that was either really brave or a little bit foolish. And my parents just waved me off.
And did you know, if we go a little bit back, did you know you wanted to leave the UK? Was it a plan, let me go and explore other places in the world? Or what was the original impetus for even going to Bahrain?
It's interesting because my parents actually lived in the Middle East in the 70s. So they were in Abu Dhabi, then Dubai, and then they moved to Japan. And mum got pregnant with me and wanted to be at home with her family. So they moved back to the UK. And I was born in the UK. And that was it. I was raised there. But my dad did a lot of work overseas when I was growing up, a lot of time in Kuwait. And then he started his own business, and it became a case of, should we do that last hurrah and, get some money before retiring? And that's what he did. So he moved to Saudi, and the job changed that he could live in Bahrain, go over the causeway. And my mum said...
he was in the Eastern province, in Khobar.
Yeah. So mum said, I'm going to move. And at that point, I was just turned 24, and it was a case of, do I stay in Northeast England? I was working in PR and marketing. Or do I move to London? Or do I move abroad? So then it became a case of, well, why not go to Bahrain? Why not see what that's like?
Yeah, so the region wasn't that foreign to you. There's a family history. No. You've been around the GCC.
Yeah, and now when my parents come to visit, they're very comfortable living and driving here. They've still got friends here. They were members at Dubai Offshore Sailing Club in the 70s. I'm a member there now. So it feels comforting.
Does this feel like home?
It does.
Is this home now?
Yeah, it does, because I feel like I've lived in different neighborhoods all over Dubai and had a very different experience of the city through those neighborhoods. And it's now that I've got kids and I've got dogs and I love where we live that I feel really settled. And yes, when I go back to the UK, that still feels like home in some ways, but I know I've changed so much. And I treasure that time there and I love being with friends and family there. But I don't feel like the me I am now as a mum in her late 30s there, because that's not who I was. I was 23, 24 when I left there, and it was a very different life and very different experience. So Dubai has become home in the sense that this is where I met my husband. It's where I've built a family. This is where I've built my career. And I guess this is where my professional value lies a lot of the time. And it's where I've met friends that I'll hopefully have for life. So the thought of leaving, and I've got no plans on leaving, is not appealing at all.
And I'm fascinated by what you do, because I really feel that you have found what appears to be a really healthy medium. You obviously have your day job on radio, right, in Dubai Eye, but then you also have a blog, and the mothership, and a website, essentially, and a business. I mean, it's a full... How do you define that?
It's
like
really
a platform
hard.
In a way, I guess.
A platform, I guess, is the best way of putting it. It was never the intention, just to be like...
Sure.
I think a lot of people come into social media or wanting to be an influencer and think about the money, which is the absolute wrong way of approaching it, to my mind, because that's not how it's kind of worked for me. So I was working in publishing. I came to Dubai to literally write guidebooks for Dubai and writing off-road books. And then I went into magazines and worked magazines.
Good magazine for a long time.
Yeah, so I worked on What's On, and I launched Good Magazine, which I always think of as being like my first baby. And I loved that magazine so much.
Very special.
But then I had my first daughter and quickly learned that it's basically impossible to be a magazine editor full-time and have family time. Or I found it really challenging. So I went freelance and started the mothership when Phoebe was about 6 months old. And at that point, it really was to kind of, I've always been a writer, to help me process.
Was it started from day one with an audience in mind, or was it first because you're a writer, just honestly almost like writing a diary or a journal, and then you were like, let me take this online?
No, it started with like Squarespace and $20, me sitting on my sofa going, how on earth do I actually put text into this white space? Because there were blogs and social media to an extent back then, because that was 6 years ago. But everything felt very like high-end and shiny and perfect, which I absolutely see the appeal of that. I understand wanting that escapism and that aspirational life.
It's like the Goop type of model.
Of course. Yeah. That's not me, and that wasn't my experience.
None of us look like her.
No.
Well, I mean, I do a little bit. I do a little bit fine, but I mean, most of you don't.
I didn't feel like there was anything for me out there, then maybe that's where I could come in as a writer and as a new mum and kind of share my experiences. And of course, never with any kind of commercial idea in mind at that point at all. It really was just like, this is what I'm going through. This is what I found useful. I've never had a strategy. I still don't have a strategy for anything I'm doing. But now that kind of works in parallel, that I have the mothership, and that's personal, but still an element of kind of recommendations. That's always what I've loved about writing. That's why I loved working in magazines, that sharing of information, the being one to introduce people to ideas and companies and services and people. I love that.
Well, I mean, if you'd allow me to package it, I think there is a strategy. And to me, the strategy is a combination of two things. Very effective storytelling. So you tell stories well, you're witty, but also a very healthy dosage of honesty and vulnerability, but it doesn't feel put on. It really feels very much you.
Too tired to try and put on any kind of facade.
And that's why it resonates.
It doesn't. You can. My goodness, as you say, vulnerability has become a bit of a currency, and I think there's a huge amount of power in vulnerability, and I think it's really, really powerful. But do people take it too far, and it becomes oversharing, and that becomes a bit off-putting sometimes.
And it's a very thin line.
It is. It really is. Yes, I'm open. Am I open to the point where people know everything about my life? No, of course not, because my husband wouldn't stay with me. and my children would be mortified.
Let's remember, one of the reasons he's with you now is because of this hose thing.
Yes.
That removes, his car is clean.
We're in a good place.
Yeah, you're in a good place. 6 to 12 months with the mobile hose.
But I think why it has been going so well is that peer-to-peer recommendation. You have a lot of people who've moved to Dubai and you haven't got that family or friend network. So sometimes you do find yourself looking to social media for someone who goes, she's got kids the same age as me, she's having a similar experience, she's a working mum. What does she find useful? And because I am, you won't be shocked to learn this, I like to be busy. Come the weekend, I'm like, let's go here, let's try that, and I'm happy to be a bit of a guinea pig for people to try out new places. And I'm always very open and say, this was good, this was not so good, they need to work on this. Then people trust that, and then companies want to get involved in that because they understand the value of that peer-to-peer recommendation.
Before we go into the company sort of / monetization aspect, which I think is very interesting, I want to go first to the first piece, which we're talking about sharing and versus oversharing. How do you gauge that? Because it's a thin line. And you're, depending on your mood, are you tired, you're not tired? That's
exactly it. Sometimes I can write something and look back and go, ooh, that was a bit kind of close to the bone, or it comes back to a comfort level that I've kind of
you just trust your gut?
Trust my gut.
You send.
Yeah.
No one else, you don't run it by anyone?
No, because
it will lose that spontaneity. Maybe.
Exactly. So sometimes I'll write it in my notes in my phone, or I'll just write it straight into Instagram. And what's interesting is since starting the mothership, it was very much website based at the beginning. And
now you've migrated social media.
Totally, because my goodness, not just my concentration level and focus, everyone else's. No one can be bothered, a lot of the time to click through to that extra layer of content. So no, it's much more spontaneous than that. I mean, sometimes I'll put in my notes, what do I want to address this week? What's my mini content plan for this week? And to be honest with you, as we now are in 2021, one of my kind of resolutions as sorts is to not post every day and not put that pressure on myself, and not perhaps put stuff out there just for the sake of having a post.
Yeah, because you feel you should, because maybe your followers are waiting for one.
Or if we're being really honest, it's more to do, is it about me putting something out there that's going to be liked and I'm getting that dopamine, which...
wasn't the purpose of doing this.
No, of course not. So what I'm trying to kind of reel it back a little bit and maybe do 3 or 4 posts a week that I feel are going to be either really valuable in terms of information, recommendations, experiences, whatever, or super personal. And that becomes like a little online diary of my time and my family and my experiences.
So this gets us to the second point, which is obviously there is a commercial aspect to this. You work with companies, you collaborate with them. So I have 2 questions. Question number 1 relates to your point of posting every day versus posting more sporadically. If you're working with company X, can you do that? I mean, they expect, a certain delivery.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think I'm always very clear about what's the timeline I can do. Okay. I can do this. They're never going to say, you need to post at 3:00 on the 26th. And if they do, then...
You don't want to work with them.
Not necessarily.
How did that evolution? Because obviously it didn't start from day one. I mean, you started first putting stuff out. Was it that once you started being popular, companies started coming to you?
Yeah, well, also you've got to bear in mind, I've been on media mailing lists for like the longest time. So I already had a good relationship with PRs. And then it was more a case of people thinking about me as not being Helen from Good Magazine and being Helen from the mothership in your own right. And I can make those editorial choices for my own platform and content. So I guess it all kind of awoke at the same time as general influencer marketing woke up. So I was very much learning at the same time as a lot of companies and PRs were. And we were all just kind of going, does that seem fair? This is how much time I'm going to be spending on it. And that's the value of the product. And this is my audience now.
Who's your audience now?
Who is, well...
Sorry, I jump around. We'll go back to the company.
No, it's mostly ladies.
Okay.
It's people like me.
Yeah.
It's vast majority Abu Dhabi, Dubai.
Expat?
Mostly expat, okay. Mostly a real mix. Actually, okay. A real mix.
So not just Western expats.
No,
Arab expats,
a lot of
Western expats.
Yeah, Indian expats as well. I'd say it's probably like 75% female.
Wow, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and the age group you'd expect. So you're kind of 25 to 45.
Okay. So
it's
within your age bracket, essentially.
And I think because I'm talking a lot about the joys and often the frustrations of having younger children. So my kids are 4 and 6. People who've got children in the same kind of rough age group, because parents who've got teenagers are having a very different experience to what I'm having, with a 4-year-old. It's that shared experience. It comes back to that, oh my goodness, my kids asked 400 questions today. Or, oh my goodness, we've got a long weekend coming up and we need to get out, but I want to feel like it's somewhere safe. You find your tribe.
And how much of putting your family, whether it's your husband, your children, out there, do you do and think about? Is that
increasingly?
Okay.
Especially now the kids are getting older.
Yeah, so they're more conscious of it.
Yeah, I mean, they like to ham it up for the camera, like all kids these days. you know. But then equally, I try. Again, coming back to resolutions, I'm trying to put my phone away a lot more. So my phone is now charging outside the bedroom. I bought this thing called a radio alarm clock. Can you believe it? I went back in time and purchased it. But when I get home, my phone's going in my bag, and I'm trying really hard to not be taking as many photos of them. If we do need to do any collaborations, to maybe kind of compress that into
So they're not
an hour.
constantly like...
They're not constantly.
Does your husband get annoyed?
Yeah, of course he does. He gets a little bit sick of the whole, like, I'm an Instagram husband, I'm going to take 50 photos of you.
And do you say, but honey, it's work, or how do you...
He understands the value in it. He understands that sometimes it might be a paid-for collaboration, and sometimes it's about me trying to communicate something in a picture that is going to work with a caption that I feel is important. He gets it.
Oh, of course.
He does, but I am conscious that as the kids get older, because the kids get recognised now.
No, of course.
Which I find
Have
uncomfortable.
You seen Kim Kardashian's kids? I mean, you know, or Beyonce.
Yeah, it's just the same, Hashem.
They have perfumes named that. Well, not quite, but I mean, you know what I mean. We have to aspire.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, no, I mean, they're currency too.
Have I put a time limit on, say, when Phoebe gets to 7, she's not going to be in photos or videos anymore? No. Is it something I'm considering? Yes. But it comes back to that comfort factor of choosing companies that I want to work with, of writing things that I feel is where I am headspace-wise and comfort level-wise.
And when the companies come to you, do you have a filtering mechanism? And is it all inbound, or could it also be that you're walking somewhere, you're like, oh, this is a cool brand, I'd love to work with them. Hey, you know what? Let me talk to somebody.
It's all inbound.
Okay, it's all coming to you.
Yeah,
Great.
which is great.
Power of brand, yeah.
It is. It's funny you should say that, because it's only in the last 24 hours I've actually approached someone about doing a collaboration.
Because why not, right?
And my kind of filter philosophy from the beginning has always been thinking about my best friends. Would this be useful to them?
And do you ask your best friends, or do you make that decision?
I tend to make that decision, but I can run things past them, because we all kind of operate in some kind of echo chamber. We know whether we realize it or not. And sometimes it's a case of like, what do you think of this? Or have you tried this? You know, would this be... but I'd say the majority of the time it's me making that call. It obviously gets easier to turn things down when you have a regular job and you don't need the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think having the day job of the radio is made that security.
Yeah, you can say no when you want to. Which
I do. I probably turn down
a big chunk.
60 to 70% easily.
What I really liked following you on Instagram is, I remember at some point last year, you said at some point, you know, guys, heads up, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to having a lot of posts about different companies. I just want you to know why I'm doing this. You explained it. You explained that this has been in the making over several months, but it's all coming out now. I found that, honestly, again, I mean, very refreshing, because I think when, frankly, this is a commercial endeavor, very few people would say that. They would just do it. And I probably would have thought then, oh, I mean, Helen has gone...
a bit crazy.
It's a bit much.
Yeah.
And you kind of essentially preempted the whole thing, which was brilliant.
I felt like I really needed to, because towards the end of last year, there were so many companies, big and small, who really needed that kind of pre-Christmas boost to sales, or there were events coming up they wanted to be driving people towards. And it all just came together in this completely imperfect storm of kind of content over a couple of weeks, where I felt like it's going to be every other day I'm posting something. And as you said, it had, some of them had been weeks and months in the making, but they all had this time period of...
But you explained it.
Yeah, and I felt I needed to, because I was feeling deeply uncomfortable when I looked at my content calendar over the next couple of months. And let's be honest, people who follow influencers, bloggers, content creators... There is an increased level of sophistication now. People know that people are being paid for this. So why not address that and just say, this is the situation, and I hope you know that I've chosen companies and events and services or whatever that will be useful to you, that please don't switch off, because these are companies that, small companies that need help right now. These are things that will enhance your experience, whether that's shopping or days out over the holidays.
And I feel you've done... not just your audience a favor, the audience being consumers, but other content creators who may have a similar situation and don't know how to deal with it. And this extends beyond content creators on social media. To give you an example, I follow a number of newsletters. Most of them are now on Substack and some other forms as well, which are brilliant. They're very niche about a particular topic. A lot of it is technology, other things, F&B because of the lighthouse, etc. And a few of them are free. Some of them have kind of a freemium model. And some of them, which I found very refreshing, similar to your strategy, started sending emails out and saying, guys, I am experimenting with a number of different ways. I'm spending now X number of hours increasingly on this newsletter. I'm going to experiment with inserting some ads. I'm going to try it and see if it works. I'd love your feedback. If I find that it doesn't work and disrupts the flow, I will start charging whatever, $3 a month. And they were actually walking you through their thought process. And when we talk about micro entrepreneurs, which is just a term for essentially what you do, and to some extent what we do, I think that's really, really important because this is not just about the consumer, meaning your kind of typical consumer, but other content creators.
Yeah, and learning from each other.
Learning from each other, exactly. And especially in this part of the world, I feel that's not something people talk about.
No, it's not. And I feel like, in honesty, because I'm technically a freelancer, so I'm a freelancer, a full-time freelancer at Dubai Eye, and I'm a freelancer, I guess, in my own space, whether that's writing or working as a celebrant or voiceovers or whatever that might be. I don't feel like I've got someone to learn from. In some ways, I would love someone to be like, Helen, this is what you should be doing. And guess what? The money's amazing. And you're going to spend 2 hours on this a day and 1 hour on this a day. And this is where you're working towards. And I haven't got that. So we do need to look in some ways to each other.
At some point, a newsletter, maybe you start free and potentially, I have seen that, the way I justified it to myself is, I hope they don't hate me for saying this, but, cutting your cable cord, essentially, let's say OSN or whatever, and you're spending 400 dirham a month. If I split that now into 10 newsletters that I get each for $3, honestly, much better value for money, far better for me. I enjoy it so much more. And that model hasn't been, it's obviously very popular now in the US, a little bit in Europe as well. But I think there's definitely something when you have a certain critical mass that becomes very interesting to explore.
Yeah. And I feel like this year, it's kind of unfashionable to say, but I didn't feel like 2020 was personally, professionally a disaster for me at all. Which is great. And I'm unspeakably grateful about that, in the sense that I was able to keep my day job. I was able to work with companies on the blog that I liked and respected and was able to, profit from. What does this year hold? Hopefully a bit more growth and strategy, because last year, I think for many people, it was just about battening down the hatches and let's just get through it. So I think this coming year is going to be quite interesting in terms of where do I decide to take that? And where do I find the headspace to take a step back and go, where do I want this to go? Because I still don't know that.
Could you see yourself at some point doing this full time?
I love the radio too much right now, and I'm learning so much, and I love working in a team again. And I think every entrepreneur or freelancer will understand how lonely it can be to work on your own.
Yes, that's very true.
And I'm naturally a social person, so being at home writing for hours on end,
with young kids.
Yeah, I really struggled with. So I found myself at that point a couple of years ago working from cafes and, meeting up with other friends who had blogs or were journalists, and us having like a bit of a, kind of co-working situation. I don't think I'd want to do this full time. I love the balance that I have of being in an office and being exposed to different people and storylines and narratives and industries through broadcasting, and then to have my own little space of the internet or social media that's just for me.
It strikes me as incredibly self-aware because, and I'll speak even for myself, it's very tempting when something is going well to feel just do more of it, expand it. And we see this with the Lighthouse, when we reopen and we're very lucky to be doing well and the brand resonates with our customers, but there's always the kind of like, do more now. And you have to kind of go back as, I think, a founder and owner or whatever operator and say, what do I want to really do? That's quite mature, and that requires a high level of self-awareness.
Or requires having made the mistake and being really miserable and learning from it.
Okay, that's true.
and I think that kind of more in every aspect of life, like exercise, like beast mode, or be a boss babe, all that kind of stuff, I find a little bit off-putting. And speaking totally honestly, I'm not a massively ambitious person. I'm not mega motivated by money. I'm generally quite a content person. I'm overall largely very, very happy, and I'm quite happy with the way things are going. So do I want to kill myself
You don't strike me as unambitious.
No, and I'm very hardworking.
Yeah.
But I'm not someone who ties their personal happiness to professional success.
So you equate your self-actualization, I think, seems to matter a lot.
It does, of course. I feel like I need to be kind of living true to my values. So do I want to kill myself over the next couple of years to reach crazy levels of fame, success, professionals? No, I'm not interested in it.
We'll be back to talk books for children with Helen Farmer right after this short break. Hi guys, I wanted to share a quick update from the Lighthouse. We've now expanded our delivery radius and we now cover Sufuh, the Palm, all the way up to Media City and Internet City. We also cover JBR, JLT, Discovery Gardens, and Emirates Hills. So if you haven't tried it out, hit up our Instagram at thelighthouse_AE, where you can click on Order Food button and get our amazing classic dishes at home. We're also on Deliveroo for those die-hard Deliveroo fans. Welcome back. You're listening to the Lighthouse Conversations with our guest, Helen Farmer. Let's talk a little bit about your love of books and the written word. So you have a book club.
I am in a book club, which had a wonderful, wonderful meal at Lighthouse for our last one. And actually, that went down in history as one of our top spots of 2020.
Oh, is that right? Oh, thank you very much.
We had a mini award ceremony.
Maybe we're going to create like a book club dish for you guys.
That's a great idea.
I feel, like a literary
every dish
inspired.
Blew my mind.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
That's very kind. How did that come about?
The book club?
Yeah.
So through the radio, I'm lucky enough to have amazing guests on the show to talk about all sorts of different things and also to connect with people from like PR and marketing and F&B. So Courtney Brandt is a food writer here, Eta Zatar, and she came on the show. And then Sarah Hadley-Heimers, who's an amazing travel writer, came on the show. And then it turned out they're in the book club. And speaking honestly, I just invited myself to join.
That's great.
I was like, yeah.
So they had a book club already?
Yeah, so it's all...
That was your pitch?
Yeah.
And they were like, or were they like,
yes? That, Helen. But we've always... It's people who understand. Like I was saying earlier, that if you are a freelancer, it's hard to have these kind of social and learning moments from people, from contemporaries. So the book club is journalists and people who work in PR, people who work in F&B, and we come together. And yes, we have a good bitch and gossip, which is often much needed. And we talk about books for at least 10% of the time.
And who chooses? Do you each choose?
Ooh, good question.
I'm all about the choice.
Some people, sometimes it's floated a little bit. So I suggested Untamed, which, have you read Untamed?
No, but I heard about it.
You need to.
Okay.
So you were speaking earlier about that kind of that comfort or discomfort.
Was that your first suggestion?
I have had one that tanked.
Okay.
That's always uncomfortable.
How does it tank? They all come back?
When everyone hates the book. And you're sitting there going, oh God.
Okay, all right.
Please no one remember that it was me that suggested Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Shh. No one look up in the WhatsApp group to say it was me sending a link to Goodreads. But in Untamed, which I think was probably one of my favourite reads in general, even outside the book club of last year, Glennon Doyle talks about the knowing, which people look at in all different ways. It could be, your faith or your spirituality or sense of self, but it's knowing in yourself where you're good, where where you feel true to yourself. And I think that's kind of what I keep on trying to come back to with the show, but also more so the blog. So the book club has become a monthly chance to kind of go out.
It's once a month.
Once a month, we go out and we try different places around Dubai, sometimes new, sometimes favourites that other people might not have visited. And we get to eat some great food and we get to have a bit of an offload as well.
I mean, I was very tempted to crash it.
You should have crashed it.
And I was going to come in with this perspective that you need a male perspective to this. First sit down, say, I'm just going to have a quick coffee, but then sit through.
2 hours.
And then bring out my book. Be like, I have something for you.
Well, and also now Dubai does have a lot of great authors as well. So we're trying to read some more from here. We did have, I'm not going to mention the author, but we have had a couple of instances where the author has joined us and people didn't like the book. That's pretty uncomfortable.
But fair enough. Is that what a debate is all about?
Good to get some feedback. So it's going to be interesting because the Lit Fest obviously is coming up.
I was going to say, that was exactly my thinking. Maybe you guys should hook up with the Emirates Lit Fest.
Maybe we will.
It would be brilliant.
But something I do feel pressure on is to write a book. And I interviewed...
Yeah, so you mentioned a book deal earlier, which resonated with me because we had talked about YouTube before. And it was interesting, which also it says a lot about...
How old I am?
No, how you grew up. Because I grew up in the exact same way where, a book deal is a big deal. Both my parents are professors. They both write for a living. My wife does as well. So when you said book deal, I kind of smiled. So I want to go back to that. So that's something you want to do.
It is, but not yet. I mean, certainly, I think for people who write, like that gold standard is writing like a long form novel, I do not have the concentration or the focus to do that. I really enjoy reading short stories. I've written short stories before. I've written some poetry. So it would be fiction? It wouldn't be... I don't know.
Okay.
I even think it would be nice to write a children's book, which is one of the toughest things to do. People think because there's maybe only 1,000 words, but you've really got to make every single word count. And my daughter and I, over Christmas, started writing a little book together. So she's 6. And I was like, how fun would it be to write a book with a kid? And I was like, Phoebe, what's your idea for a book? What would you like to read? And she's like, I want it to be about a kid who finds a leaf, but she doesn't know which tree it's from. And she travels around the world trying to match that leaf to different trees and meets people along the way. I'm like, that's actually a really good idea.
It's brilliant. Children's books are brilliant. And they're for adults, by the way. So I do the buying for the Lighthouse, and we sell quite a few children's books, Arabic and English. And that's one of my favorite activities. When I travel, I go to bookstores, take a billion pictures of books that I like, and then I go back, and then I open the ones, some of them. And every year I have 3 or 4 choices that I love, and they work for adults and children. There's something very, what's the word for it? I mean, not just honest, but raw about...
Yeah, and I feel like they can be so useful. Yes, it's escapism and it's exploring foreign lands and, but they're also such a conduit for kind of other truths and really difficult topics as well. A friend recently lost her son lost his best friend, and she just posted on Facebook last night saying, does anyone know about any books that will help my 6-year-old understand death?
Grief, yeah.
And I was like, well, isn't that true? Because we often don't trust our own words in a moment of upset or emotion or passion. So to be able to go to something or someone that's been able to take the time to really consider the message is so useful. And it can be anything. It could be talking about identity or love or travel or loss, divorce. Changing Bodies is like the favorite book on our household last night because they're like, talk to us about, how babies are made. And I'm like, I don't trust my words for this. Let's take Amazing Bodies off the shelf and leave it to they can be such a useful tool and prop for parents to start conversations. And I think that's something that I would like to kind of explore a little bit. But
there's an amazing blog called Brain Pickings by Maria Popova.
Okay, thank you.
Very particular. You have to kind of check it out for yourself, and we'll put in the show notes as well. And Maria Popova every year recommends a number of books, both children and adults. And her children books choices are mesmerizing. And she's a league of her own. I mean, really, on all levels. And she looks at the whole concept. And she just last week sent out an email to her followers saying she's been secretly working on a children's book.
See?
So here you go. Do you read a lot with your children?
All the time.
Okay. They like reading?
Yeah, they love reading.
One more than the other or both?
Well, they're being a bit different ages. Okay. So the older one is reading herself now, which blows my mind because we'll be driving along and she'll point out signs. She'll be like, noon. Like, yeah. So cute. Well, they are signs are everywhere. So,
That's true.
But she read to me last night 3 books that she got from school. And I almost got quite emotional about it because I loved reading as a kid and I really want that to be a passion that she picks up on, not just for academic stuff, but to have those escapes into other worlds and things. I think
meditation ever.
It's wonderful. And that's our time together because you have these hot little bodies pressed into you. And
Is it in the evening before they go to bed?
We do before bed, but actually this morning we read.
You do morning reading.
This is new. I
like that.
This sounds super smug. But this morning they finished their breakfast and we had 10 minutes before they needed to get dressed. So we got back into my bed and we read a couple of books because I'm trying to put my phone away.
Oh, you have those extra 10 minutes.
Yeah. Again, this is day 1. Let's not get carried away. In a month's time, I'll be like, yeah, we just put on YouTube for 10 minutes so mummy could have some breakfast and have a shower. But this morning we read. And I love that, because it's physical proximity as well. It's, we all need to sit huddled around one thing, and, the younger one wants to turn the page faster and the other one wants to try and figure out what a word is. But it is that time in, which I think is amazing.
And those things stay. I mean, my wife reads to our kids. We both do a fair amount of reading with them, but she does it every night religiously. And they're also, one is 9 and one is 5, so different ages. Mm-hmm. And, of course, as you said, the 5-year-old gets a little bit flustered and just starting to read now for herself and kind of wants to either sabotage it or read another book and so on. But I really think these things resonate over time.
And it's something that, like, when I think about, like, my attitude towards money, there are some things that I really resent spending money on. Like perfume. I don't know why. I feel like other people should buy me perfume.
Oh, okay. So you like perfume, you just want to buy yourself.
I just don't want to buy it. But I would spend all my money on children's books.
Okay.
Like that I've got no kind of cut-off point. I'm like, add to cart, going to Kinnikinua, go to Magrudy's, like, just load them up. And, even if we go to a hotel, I'm like, let's bring some books with us. So it is something that is kind of very important. And I love the idea of having a career that would travel in the future, that I could write from anywhere. It's kind of future-proofed, I guess.
Have you, I guess there is a bit of a travel blogging that you do as well.
A little bit about kind of getting out and about. And now the kids are older and we haven't got to have that, the tedious nap situation.
Which don't cut out.
Oh my goodness! You just think that's just our day. Just
although there were 2 great hours.
Oh no! When they were both sleeping.
I know.
That was.
Yeah. I love those 2 hours.
Oh,
God,
my
I wish
days! And it was in some ways a sad day when the naps ended. But it does open you up as a family to be able to do more. So I would like to take it a little bit. When we can travel again. That's been tough this year. I was very lucky that my parents were able to come over in November last year to spend 3 weeks with us. Like, that was so precious. They weren't able to be with us for Christmas, but normally we would travel a little bit, certainly in the summer and maybe somewhere else. And this time it was more to do with we started camping as a family. Who am I?
That's great.
But it was amazing.
And when you look at your children, you've obviously yourself experienced some time abroad growing up. So this is not very unusual. But you're kind of, I guess, more typical situation would be where you've grown up in one place, let's just say England, and your kids are growing up here in Dubai. How is your husband British as well?
Yeah.
Okay. I always want to talk about this a little bit because this identity issue is something we all feel. So how do you deal with that? Do you think they identify as British? They identify as expats, British from Dubai? And how do you talk to them about this?
I think we're all trying to figure out the language around it. So sure. Phoebe is aware that we are English.
Okay.
And she'll talk about, there's Julia in my class is French.
Okay.
Or, Samira is from India.
Correct.
But I don't think she doesn't know the word expat. She wouldn't know what a third culture kid is. But a lot
of them say we're from Dubai, I find so interesting.
Yeah. So my mum was a teacher's assistant in Muscat, and they used to do this thing when kids came into the class and they'd sit in a circle and, they'd say, I am, Phoebe from England. And they had one kid that said, Mrs. Spearman, I don't know where I'm from. And a kid piped up, where you go on your holiday, that's where you're from. Because you have all these expat kids who will go back to their home country, somewhere they weren't born or have never lived often, but that will be deemed to be home.
How do you feel about that? Because I would assume you grew up, there was no question about being English, right? I grew up in Egypt and there was very little in my mind about being Egyptian. I was just Egyptian. Most kids around me were Egyptian. Actually, many were German, but I was in German school, but half and half. So how do you deal with that?
It's the future that I'm more concerned about because I'm so aware that my kids are growing up with kids from all different backgrounds, nationalities, cultures, religions. And if we do move back to the UK, which, as I said, is certainly not an imminent plan, especially right now, would we then put them into a village school where everyone has grown up together and known each other since year dot and everyone has parents that look the same?
Yeah.
And it sounds really patronizing, but their only travel experiences might be like, 2 weeks abroad where they probably stay in a hotel where they eat the same food as they would do back home.
Doesn't look like you're going back anytime soon, by the way.
No, it's not. But I feel so blessed that my kids are able to have this kind of broader experience. And would I then want to implode things again.
Yeah.
No, because I feel like they've learned so much. And at the minute, they're not going to play dates and eating food from other cultures and countries and households. But, that's available to them in Dubai, and to learn different languages. And of course, I'm very aware that there are some, not necessarily downsides, but things that I'm aware of about growing up here that, we have a nanny, which, friends back home do not have. They're able to go to these, lovely pools and have, amazing experiences. And I'm very conscious of drilling down to them. You are so lucky
to have that.
How real that feels to them, I don't know. And we have been in the last few months, like really trying to talk about, get them to understand that there are people
and
who
expose them a little bit to some of that.
So we've done a lot with Stop and Help over the last year, and have been matched with a couple of families that we are, like Phoebe sends a video message to a little girl, and they, talk about the characters they like and, what they want, just a bit like having a pen pal. So the spoiled expat brat thing is a bit of a lazy trope and stereotype.
True.
In a lot of ways, but I do feel like they are living a very privileged life here, and it's something that I want them to be aware of.
But you seem very comfortable with it. And again, I don't want to over-exaggerate, but I think probably your own upbringing and your own experience has a bit to do with that. So
Maybe.
It's not necessarily very new to you or very novel or...
No, not necessarily, but it does kind of make me laugh when they come home and they go, Freddie's house has 9 bathrooms. And I'm like, that's not normal, right?
There's obviously kind of quote unquote expat living, and then there's Dubai, which is just on its own kind of trajectory.
Birthday parties.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, no, I know there was a horse dressed as a unicorn, and Elsa was there. Can we just take a moment where my birthday parties were literally at home, and my mum had made a cake that looked like a castle with upside down ice cream cones, and it was bliss. Yeah, and equally, my kids would, I hope would just be happy at home having, just their friends over for a bit of a play.
That's going to be very interesting, I think, going into 2021 and beyond, and as hopefully the pandemic starts receding, to see, have we all kind of taken that moment, reflected, and you'll see different behaviors, or are we all going to go back?
I feel like there's going to be a big boomerang back,
and maybe even more of everything we had, but more of the same.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just human nature, maybe.
That has been discussed when you think about Great Depression and going into the Roaring 20s, and suddenly everyone's living these lives of opulence and partying, and that's not going to be the case for me, but I feel like that could definitely be the case in the younger generations. I'm trying to keep expectations for 2021 pretty realistic. I don't feel like we're going to be like, it's back to normal. And yes, of course, we've got this vaccine, but I don't necessarily think it's the great immediate hope that we think it's all going to be. There's going to be a lot of time and adjustment and admin and that's fine. That's
life.
Yeah, it is life. It's crazy when we think about what we've been through in this last year. And I feel really lucky that my kids are young enough to have some level of understanding, but the academic side hasn't been massively affected.
And frankly, we're all lucky, including those that have kids, to have been in a city, frankly, where things went back to normal pretty quickly. Quick. I mean, there's no doubt. Yeah. I'm extremely grateful to the fact that, I almost feel guilty, as you said earlier, when you were talking about your own job this year, when I speak to some of my friends in the UK and the US and so on and so forth. And I'm like, I hate to tell you this, when they're like, well, we're in lockdown and this and that and haven't seen people in 6 months. I'm like, I've been kind of, with masks and those social distancing, but back to normal since the summer.
I know. And, speaking to friends back home in the UK over Christmas who...
Depressing.
I think depressing is the right word. And unfortunately for a lot of people, I think there's going to be a lot of misery, a lot of loneliness, a lot of fear. And I do feel incredibly lucky to be here, where we've had some really clear directions. It sounds trivial, but the weather...
Yeah.
We're in,
yes, in
the winter.
I'm wearing a T-shirt.
I'm wearing jeans and boots and a jumper, but
fair enough.
But it's bliss. It's great to have that seasonality. It's great to be able to go to the beach. And, I look at my brother who lives in central London with a toddler and a newborn, and they're in lockdown in a 3-bedroom house. And that's hard. That's really, really hard. And who knows what the future might bring. So we don't know how things could unfold over the coming months, but I think we just need to kind of keep on keeping on, not get slack. Hashtag we are responsible, but we are, and I feel like it's human nature to have got used to certain things like the hand washing, but we need to kind of keep on it because we can't let this drag on any longer.
No,
if we go back to distance learning full time,
no, I'm not going back.
I'm not going back.
Yeah.
Phoebe,
I don't care.
I would get the iPad out and Phoebe would cry. Yeah. We would both cry before 9 a.m. frequently.
No,
I can't do it. The most important thing is keep communicating with our kids about this, keep talking about the importance of it, keep listening to them, keep validating how they're feeling and validating how we're feeling because, I think free therapy for everybody, which is what today has been for me.
Helen, thank you. That's been wonderful. Once you start having ideas about your book, I'm all ears,
Good.
whether it's children's book or not.
I hope you stock it.
I will definitely stock it and very happy to brainstorm anytime. I mean that.
Good to know.
I love the idea of just idea generation and someone wanting to work on a personal project. It's great.
Thank you.
Afternoons with Helen Farmer is on Dubai Eye 103.8 weekday afternoons at 2 p.m. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Lighthouse Conversations with me, Hesham Montasir. We're produced by Chirag Desai and our content director is Farah Al-Sharif. Catch all our episodes and don't miss new ones by going to your favorite podcast player like Apple or Spotify and hitting subscribe. Or go to our website, thelighthouse.ae/podcast to listen to all our previous episodes. You can always connect with us on Instagram at @thelighthouse_AE. We'll see you in 2 weeks.